Okay,
Okay,
turn it over to you, Carla. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, hi everyone. So I'm not used to Zoom, but it seems to be working out wonderful. So I'm not sure how to see your faces if you put on your computer, your video, but I know Peggy's going to help me out with the tech piece. So anyway, as she said, I would introduce myself, and that's my preference usually. My name is Carla Arenas Itotia, and I am an associate professor of practice for the School of Social Work at the University of Texas at Arlington. And so initially we were going to have two other presenters with us, which are listed below, but these are they weren't able to be here today. So I will be taking the lead on showing you all the great things that we have been doing at the UTA School of Social Work. So as she mentioned, this is an interprofessional task force on interpersonal violence education. That's a mouthful, but I hope that I will be able to break it down to you and see how what we have done might be something that you would like to do within your settings, right? So I am going to be talking about our campus setting, but it's not necessarily something that just has to stay in a campus setting. I'm going to encourage you to think about how can you bring in this information to your setting, whether that's healthcare, that's your agency, maybe it's law enforcement, however it is. I want you to start thinking about that because maybe you'll have some good questions for me towards the end of how I can help you or give you tips on how to bring this type of education to your areas. So anyway, yes, so like I said, Carla Arenas Itotia, UTA School of Social Work professor, but my background really has been in relationship and sexual violence, from outreach to shelter to, counselor, case manager, legal advocate. I've done the mental health things, done a variety of different things, and now I teach primarily to help our students become better professionals, right? Okay, put next. So I am, here to thank every single person who's made a lot of this happen. And I was actually telling Peggy here that none of this that has happened was planned. It just kind of all happened because of COVID. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But regardless, these are all the groups and people that have made the task force what it is today. And so from Dr. Rachel Vostrog to the top left, the Assistant Dean of Simulation. At the bottom, Jennifer Roy. We have Professor Orwig, Tracy Orwig to the bottom. And then we have the School of Social Work, the Center for Research and Teaching and Learning Excellence. We've won, I believe, 2 grants through them and their support. The College of Nursing and Health Innovation, the task force, of course, the health committee, an experiential learning committee, which I know Tracy, she wasn't able to be here, but she did do a quick audio so you can hear her talk about the experiential learning committee, students, volunteers, the IP committee, and just everybody. So you can see that this really does take a village. It takes a group of people to pull off a lot of these things, right? But if you're thinking about your setting, who are your stakeholders? Who do you need to have buy-in from in order to develop trainings for your people, right? Who's your audience? And start thinking about who are the people who would make this happen, right? This is a task force, and so we have a task force of people from staff, faculty, students across the entire campus from multiple disciplines that you probably wouldn't even think about, like computer science and, education and social work and nursing and so many more. Oh, can't put, there we go. So the idea is that today you'll be able to learn about how we developed, how we implemented the task force on our campus, understand how to develop and implement, the kind of activities that we'll be talking about, and also how to implement and adapt what we've done to your own campus or your own setting. So what is this task force that I keep talking about, right? So we are an interdisciplinary task force, and we're focused on creating learning activities, but specifically experiential learning activities related to issues of interpersonal violence. So we want our activities to raise awareness, increase survivor empathy, improve bystander efficacy, develop professional skills that lead to trauma-informed practices and safer outcomes for survivors. So we want to educate our community. We want to give them something that's transformational. So it's not just reading a book and writing a paper, right? For our students, which is the traditional format of how a lot of people have typically taught is here's your syllabus, and on the syllabus here's your books, here's your articles, write a paper, right? But we started thinking, what if instead of making them read a book about safety planning or write a paper on safety planning, what if we actually made them do it like real world setting? Can we make them do it, and then they get their first experience? So for a lot of us who are in social work, are really our a lot of us, our first time working with a client is when we go out to field placements, which is our training. They make us do 400 something hours out in the community in an agency, and all you've had, possibly some students, find their way back to social work after being professionals for a bit. And so they might have some sort of experience, professional experience, but many don't. And so the first time they find themselves in front of an actual client is when they throw them in there for internship. So is that really the best practice? It seems to be the traditional thing that we do in social work, is say, okay, here's your classes, and then we go to field instruction. But what if we could offer them something in between? And we could say, instead of the first time you have to do safety planning, whether it's for suicide or a domestic violence or whichever, right? What if we can give you a simulated client for you to do that with them first, as realistic as possible, so that when you get to the real person in front of you, you're actually better prepared, not just read a book and wrote papers, but you actually got some hands-on experience. And so that's kind of what we were thinking, like how can we offer them an in-between to better prepare them for field, but also better prepare them as a licensed professional when they're out in the field now with a license, right? So that is kind of our goal of what the task force is trying to do. Sort of, as I say, one stone, two birds, right? Where we are giving skilled experiences and opportunities to practice to people who are going to be professionals as formal supports. But we also wanted to capture all of the people who might not necessarily be social workers, but they're going to have some role. So are you a criminal justice student? Are you an educator? Are you, a psychology student, or even people who you might think have nothing to do with it, athletic training and kinesiology and all that kind of stuff, because whether they're going to be a formal support or not, they will probably always be an informal support. So they might have a formal role, or they might have an informal role. And so we wanted to be able to still educate our community regardless. And so we have some experiential activities that focus more on general, anybody can participate, interdisciplinary, and we have some that are very specific to certain professions. Either way, we try to encourage interprofessional education, which means, instead of just grouping them up, oh, these are the social works taking this simulation, these are the nursing students, we try to make sure that we mix the professions so that they get different diverse perspectives. So we established this in spring 2020. If anybody remembers what happened in 2020, COVID. So the way that this sort of happened was we said, oh, that would be kind of cool to have these types of activities. And we decided to host an in-person training. We had 300 students signed up and ready to go. This was an assignment for a lot of the classes that So the faculty basically said, oh, this sounds cool, let's sign up my class. And they offered it as an actual assignment, right? And then March 2020 happened and the world went upside down. The world closed. It was a ghost town out and about, the dangers of being together, right? And I thought, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And that's pretty much the thought that everybody had probably. What are we going to do, right? How do we continue the education? How do we continue the world? How do we, all that? Luckily, I had been teaching online for quite a while, despite most of the campus hating to teach online. And so, I mean, some of them liked it, some of them didn't like teaching online. It was just not as popular. And so, but I was one of those who did. And so maybe that helped me, because in a month I was able to put together this in-person training and turned it into a Canvas course that was asynchronous, like an online kind of course. And we did it that way. I had no idea what to expect, no idea if it was going to work. And it did. And turns out it had a really high satisfaction success rate. It was like a 90% plus positive feedback. So we thought, maybe we're onto something here, and we should probably keep this going. So we did. These are some of the disciplines that have participated. We've had a couple more, but these have been consistent in participating. We have 2 accepted journal articles, 3 currently in the writing related to this work. We've gotten 46,000-ish in grants, and we've had about 15 local, state, and national conferences where most people have said, yes, we want to hear about this. So what we've learned is, while simulation-based learning or experiential-based learning is very often found in a lot of healthcare professions, while social work can be a healthcare profession, but not everybody will go into healthcare, but it can. That's really just hasn't been our gold standard. It hasn't been what we do. And so a lot of the simulation-based learning that's out there really focuses on like medical school and nursing. And they don't really have a lot of topics related to social problems, right? Social issues, interpersonal violence. And so we seem to have been pioneers in this area. And so I want to be able to show you what we've done to see if there's any way that you guys can take anything from it, because I do think that it's been a successful model in the higher ed world with us doing this just since 2020. And it might be something you can implement by learning. So you're going to be learning a little bit about, there's the social work component, there's the interpersonal violence component, but I think what's innovative here is the ability to make it virtual, online, and present information to many people at once in a safe way, right? Because there's a safe component here. We can't just give people information and then just be like, okay, go deal with it. We have to have a process to handle that. And so I'll let you guys know what that's all about. Okay. So simulations. So simulation-based learning, experiential learning is basically giving people the opportunity to do hands-on learning so that it's transformative, that it's something that sticks with you and you don't forget, right? Personally, I can't remember all of the things I wrote in college, and every now and then I come across a paper I wrote and I'm like, you mean I wrote that? Like, I don't even remember writing that or anything like that, right? But all the experiential activities that I did, I remember it like it was yesterday. Like I can remember because my senses were involved. I remember thinking through it and really putting myself in people's shoes, which is a nice segue to our first simulation. So many of you have probably heard of In Her Shoes, that was developed by Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And so at this time, when we started this, they did not have virtual virtual versions of this. And so one of our professors created a virtual version prototype, which is what we actually used. We later worked with the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence to help them develop their virtual kits that they now have for sale. So we did work with them to show them our product, our prototype, and see how we could make it better and have them be able to put it out into the world. And so the In Her Shoes, that was the one that we were going to do in person, and I had to figure out how to do that. So what it is experiential learning about domestic violence. So essentially participants, if you haven't done it before, it's kind of like a Goosebumps book or Choose Your Own Adventure book, where you get a narrative about like a character. You're a character, and in this character, and some of them include the perpetrators perspective as well, which is really interesting. And you make decisions as if you were the survivor. So you get to move, think, and act as if you were the survivor experiencing this abusive relationship and make decisions. Some of these decisions lead to good outcomes, some of them lead to poor outcomes, some to fatal outcomes. And it really does a good job of giving you like a good general understanding about domestic violence, as well as that even if you make the best decisions, it doesn't mean everything's going to work out. So really, I think helps increase survivor empathy, right? Like empathy for survivors. So we've had way over 1,000 students participate, because every time we do this, and we do it every semester, there's really about 300 400 participants at a time from numerous disciplines. The good thing is, so since Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence, they eventually put out the virtual ones, we now have access to the original, the economic version, the teens dating version, the Latinx version, and Africa version. Those two we were able to put together still in prototype form, because those are not offered on their website. So the online, but we can have people choose, this is the experience that I want. So for instance, I'm teaching a Latina experience class. There's a section on gender and gender-based violence. And so we are going to be doing the Latinx version because it's appropriate for that class, right? So the next one is the screening, risk assessment, and safety planning. So this is the one where I talked about, oh, well, what if we can actually have people learn how to safety plan by doing it? And so here you get simulated clients, and this one's a very skilled one. So the first one is a more general, multiple disciplines. This one is specific to social work and nursing. So we have a health setting, we have the client, and they meet with the nurse practitioner. They have to be able to identify that there's something going on, like IPV. Then they're going to make a referral to social work. Social worker gets involved. They both have the opportunity to work together, develop their own assessments, their own case notes, their own steps that they have to do within their profession, and then do a collaborative, like, okay, reporting back to each other. So it's a very real experience, what you would do in a healthcare setting. We've had over 900 participants involved, and we are currently revamping this one with our graduate assistant team. We have escalation. So now this one, so that the safety planning one was original content. So we didn't have somebody else's content. We developed that one. The other ones we modified and implemented for our setting. So the escalation is also modified and implemented, and they are hosted by or created by the One Love Foundation, and they have really neat videos. So if you haven't checked them out, you should definitely check them out. And so it goes through Yeardley Love's actual experience in college. Unfortunately, she was murdered by her partner in college, and it kind of goes through the entire story. And this one is a film-based one, where then they have to have like a big debriefing as a group about the film that they watched. And this really helps with the bystander intervention component. So general information about domestic violence, but also also like the intervention, bystander efficacy. And so you can see how each one has kind of like a little different of a focus that addresses different pieces, right? So we also, so those are our signature programs, but now we have activities that we support as well. So we've supported the study abroad in Kenya. So we actually just got back, I just got back from a trip to Kenya with 13 students and 2 other faculty members. And we wanted not to just teach people about Kenya and rural Kenya in particular, because they did get to see the city, urban areas, but also specifically rural areas. We had a host partner, a couple host partners, the Collection for Orphan Care and Education, and which provides infrastructure and sponsorship to get kids who have been orphaned due to HIV, and they often have experienced interpersonal violence, sexual violence, gender-based violence. And so we went in and brought 13 students, did in-service learning, and worked at the schools for about 2-ish weeks, and that was an incredible experience. We have the Student Coalition Against Interpersonal Violence. This, I would say, is sort of like the Taskforce version, but student version. So we oversee this organization that's student-led, that is sort of the mirror. So we are doing the faculty staff side and they're doing the student side of the work, right? Campus education, advocacy, those kinds of things. Then we work with the Relationship Violence Sexual Assault Prevention Program, which is more of like our victim services on our campus. And they also provide education as well as direct micro work with students who have experienced a lot of these things. And so we enhance and amplify a lot of the education and partner support. We also had the Survivors Unite webinar series where we wanted to provide broken down education on improving people's skills for those who want to go into this work. So that just gives you an overview of the task force, the amount of work that we have, what we do, and how we do it, right?
Hello, my name is.
So my faculty colleague is going to talk to you a little bit about experiential learning next. She left an audio for you guys.
Hello, my name is Tracy Orwig, and I'm an assistant professor of practice. In the next few slides, I will discuss experiential learning and interprofessional education, or IPE. IPE is focused on the interprofessional education collaborative competencies. Those competencies are interprofessional teamwork and team-based practice, interprofessional communication practices, values, ethics for interprofessional practice, and roles and responsibilities for collaborative practice. Interprofessional education is when 2 or more disciplines learn about, from, and with one another in order to improve outcomes. So why interprofessional education? Oftentimes in academia, we see that students are siloed, and so therefore social workers may not interact with any other disciplines. Nursing may only act with maybe, for example, medical students. So this is an opportunity for our students to get to know each other and educate each other about their various roles within their disciplines. So we focus a lot on roles and responsibilities, our students getting to know what each discipline does. And this allows them to collaborate to provide client-centered care. So when we think about application of IPE to practice, when we look at a medical setting, for example, and we have a SANE exam, if we are thinking, let's say we have a pediatric patient that presents to the emergency room, their first point of contact is a nurse, and that nurse is going to get a little bit of information and then contact a social worker. And it's really important that the nurse knows what the social worker does, so that way they can contact them. The social worker will oftentimes contact an outside agency to provide additional support, so therefore the social worker needs to know about disciplines outside of their agency. And then we have where the nurse and the social worker and the physician will get together and discuss the case and provide the care through the SANE for that individual. And in pediatric settings, we have an additional component of a child life specialist that will provide interventions directly to the child. So for example, coping strategies or distraction techniques, because a SANE can be very traumatic and they've already been traumatized. And so therefore, having that comprehensive care, having all of the disciplines working together, knowing what each other is going to provide, it provides clear lines of who's responsible for what in order to provide the comprehensive care for that individual. I wanted to share about our Experiential Learning Committee. So this committee started as an ad hoc committee. So we came together realizing that we were doing a lot of work in experiential learning, specifically interprofessional education. And after a year of not being a formal committee, we were instated as a full committee. Our committee consists of full-time faculty, adjuncts, and students. We meet to discuss our interprofessional education activities as well as the IPVE Taskforce activities. So our goals are to bring about awareness about experiential learning. We also want to focus on involvement of interprofessional education activities, both with our faculty as well as our students. We look at gaps, areas that we need to develop interprofessional education. So for example, we noticed that we didn't have an interprofessional education over child maltreatment, and that was a focus. We're also working on a variety of other IPEs. We put together a distinction certificate for our students. So when our students complete 2 or more IPEs, they can apply for this distinction certificate. So not only does it entice our students to participate in IPE, but it also brings about the students' involvement. And oftentimes we found that once a student participates in one IPE, they are asking for more IPEs. And we're also looking at the evaluations of the interprofessional education activities from our student perspectives.
Okay, so when I'm listening to all that, and I'm curious if you guys are too, but I'm thinking about all of the practical applications for your setting. So if I am an community outreach, I wonder, could I put law enforcement in a team with a nurse, with a social worker, with somebody in the legal area, and host a training where they're into teams together and they're dealing with all of their different disciplines, right? Think about the richness of that conversation, right? It might be an experience to mix them up that way, rather than just go talk to law enforcement, or just go talk to the hospital setting, or just go talk to social workers. To be able to host a training, whether it's in person or online, but online might be more accessible, right? But the type of rich dialogue that can happen, and even I don't want healthy confrontation, right? Because there could be very different perspectives, and there could be very good reasons why there's different perspectives, right? And so you could actually have people engage and develop really good relationships out in the community that might benefit the work that you do, right? So, but interpersonal violence. So in her shoes, I kind of already talked about it. So what I'm going to do is, instead of going through all these slides, because I want some time, we have 30 minutes left. I want some time for you guys to be able to ask me all the questions. So I'm just going to show you glimpses of it really quickly, and get through this so that we have more time for me to engage with you and see how I can help you apply this information. So you already know the learning objectives. I want to quickly just, okay, so wait. Actually, this one was probably be good for me to just share period right now before I show you. So just so you understand the process, for this particular simulation, what we do is we provide education, because remember, not everybody's a social worker. Not everybody has had education on domestic violence or interpersonal violence. So what we do is we usually provide like one module that's instructions, welcoming instructions, right? Understanding of just what is it that we're going to do. Then we have education, a second module where it's educational material, and the students go in and they do all of that kind of pre-work where I have like a workshop that I host and a bunch of, you know, educational components that they need to be able to perform the simulation or have general context for it, right? Then they move on to the simulation itself. After they do the simulation, then they have to have discussion posts where they have that interprofessional dialogue. One of them is focused more on interpersonal violence content. The other one is more on their profession. So let me go to that now. So you have the overview. So they kind of begin this way. And this in our world, we formatted the way that we do a course because they're already familiar with that, but you can do that very differently, however you wish. It could be a PowerPoint, you know, however you are comfortable, right? So then we have the simulation. Let me just resume wherever we are. If we had more time, I would have you guys, I did this in person and you guys actually had to participate in the simulation where we read through the narrative and you guys pick. So it says now go to abuse happens. Then basically we read this and we decide what's next. What do we want to do next? Do we want to go to the medical or do we want to go to friends and family? Let's put friends and family. Then you see how it says shelter. Let me go to shelter. Let me go to support group, you know, so you go through the entire story and you are making the decisions for this person that leads, like I said, to good, negative outcomes. You just don't know. That's another version, but I'll skip that. Then we have the debrief video because they do have a debrief and a pre-brief video. It's taking a little bit to load, sorry y'all, where we talk to them about the pre-brief, what's going to happen, what could happen to you emotionally and all the above. And then, you know, the debrief is, okay, let's process what just happened. And then after they go through the debrief, that's when they start participating. And so this one is the participation specifically on, you know, the interpersonal violence. So what feelings did you get during the simulation? What good things happen? What bad things happen? How can IPV affect someone's health? Did your attitudes change? A variety of different questions addressing the interpersonal violence and your reactions. While this one addresses the interpersonal stuff. So how can professionals help? How can they hinder? How can they advocate for better access to resources and services? What can you do as a professional? What's your takeaways, right? And so once they're done with participating in this, if they fully participated, then they have a certificate that's given to them. And our students get, so some ideas out there is we have a distinction program. So if you participate in more than one of these, then you get a distinction certificate and also distinction upon graduation for participating in these kinds of things. You could do something similar in your areas. Like if you participate in this interprofessional or experiential learning as a part of training in your community through your agency, then maybe there is some sort of distinction that can be provided. So they are reminded about resources from beginning, during, after, all the time, the resources that we have, local, national, and campus space, but we have them on standby as well. So our people from CAPS and our people from RVSP are like victim services. CAPS is the counseling. They are aware of referrals that they're going to get. And they're a part of all of the talks and the collaborations. And in addition to that, we have a student team of social work students and trained volunteers who are looking through all of the posts and making sure that nobody is triggered, nobody needs assistance. And so if there is, they can immediately intervene and connect to resources and provide support. So For the safety planning one, I do want to show you the way that we've been able to do asynchronous, because you may be wondering, well, how do you do an asynchronous simulation? What we've done is record the
Seems to be a little bit
fussy.
I don't know if she's
scenarios.
getting enough to eat.
Okay, well, let's see if we can find out why that is, what might be causing that. I'm going to ask you some questions here to get started. What about her birth history? Is she vaginal delivery?
And so they have a conversation about this wellness checkup,
Not
but
weekly, and
during
so-
this checkup, they need to
Oh, gosh.
identify that there is interpersonal violence. Many nursing students don't realize that they can diagnose that, and they might even not know what to do with that. And so they go through scenarios like this, and they also are given a patient chart where it looks like the chart that they're going to see out in the healthcare setting. And so they're able to read through it, and they have to piece together the information, make their assessment, do their case note, make their referral. Social workers have to intervene, right? So this is for the safety planning one. So let me go back. And again, for that as well, they have debriefs, pre-briefs, discussion posts, monitors, and interventions in case necessary for support, right? So I want to skip through some of this. So basically, these are the comments that a lot of students have reported off of the In Her Shoes one. So more insight, understanding how widespread IPV is, how difficult it is to break the cycle, that organizations really could be compassionate and have a lot of power to do something and help, right? Some people were interested in policy and procedure, and they feel like they now understand why people are stuck in these situations, right? What kind of barriers they're experiencing. So this is a student perspective.
Hey everyone, my name is Haley, a social work graduate assistant for the IPVE task force, and I'm tasked with implementing the simulation and supporting other students. I recently had the opportunity to work through the In Her Shoes simulations, and I wanted to share my thoughts on my experience. I personally chose to work through every story to become more acquainted with them, following all avenues that were available. It really opened my eyes to what a victim goes through, and when making the best choices, it never seemed to go the way that I thought, or led to a not ideal conclusion. This opened my eyes even further to how important being compassionate and patient with victims is, as they could have been feeling hopeless, stuck, or just making decisions based on their survival. For my career, I took away that being knowledgeable about the services provided or available is a very key component, since giving out incomplete information could be detrimental to the victim and their safety plan. When reaching out to my peers, they also found changes in their biases and initial thoughts around victims, and that leaving isn't always an option or easy. My peers also discussed the challenges of those seeking help having to navigate the paperwork and process on their own for the services, and how moving into their careers that this could be an avenue for creating change. Due to the nature of the scenarios, there was an implication and much encouragement for self-care and taking time to decompress after completing the simulation. The simulation, also being held virtually and at a self-paced interval, was great and allowed plenty of opportunities to take time in between the different stories to digest them and to take care of myself. There were also resources made available both on and off campus, and I really appreciated the debrief sessions that were held afterwards to also provide support.
And I think like it's interesting to think about you know, that In Her Shoes wasn't, I don't think, developed for students, right? This was something I took and we developed for our students, when it's really something that's done out in training in communities. So you can see how you can take from each other to build it to your own setting. So I'm just going to skip this because I want to get to our discussion piece. But essentially, this is just kind of the breakdown of the safety plan simulation. Essentially, very similar: the pre-brief, the information, education, and then their simulation, debriefs, and dialogue, right? And then for the other ones like escalation, it's more of a in-person, like or virtual, but like synchronous or in person, where they get to view it together and talk about it together, right? So I'm going to skip over a lot of this research, but essentially it's the same kind of, these are quotes at the bottom regarding collaboration. So people felt like they could collaborate a lot more with different professions and understand each other's roles better and responsibilities. They also develop communication skills because they realized that, oh my gosh, there's different jargon. If I say soap note and this person says soap note, it doesn't mean the same thing or it doesn't look the same thing. So they really had to learn jargon and learning how to be assertive and advocate, those kinds of things, realizing that, oh wow, the nursing person has a role, but I have a role too, and I have to do my part. As well as, just become more reflective. I think is better because you're able to understand the survivor and their circumstances so much better, right? So future directions. We got a new building, like a $78 million building. And in this building, they happened to put social work and nursing together. And specifically, they put the smart hospital together. So what is a smart hospital? It's basically the in-person version of what we've been doing, but not just for interpersonal violence, but for everything. So now we have a full-blown apartment that we can modify and create simulations with in person. We have staffing rooms, we have NICU rooms, we have play therapy rooms. I mean, we have everything you can think of to change things up for all kinds of stuff. We have mannequins that talk and do things, that answer questions. It's pretty incredible the kind of resources that we're able to do together in this building. And so there are opportunities for collaboration with you guys as well, to bring what we're doing to you guys or vice versa, right? Using our resources if there's a good collaboration or idea. We're also focusing on rural health because a virtual takes away it gives accessibility to people who might have not had that accessibility, whether it's disabilities or be out in rural areas, not being able to make it to UTA. Not many people are going to be able to come to the city to do certain trainings, but we can offer them. Other things like capping, we don't have to pay for a venue. We don't have to cap it at 300 people. Our Canvas courses can support 1,000 plus. As long as we're able to provide the emotional support necessary for the participants, we don't necessarily have a cap. So those are some good benefits. She also talked about being able to step away. So if you're doing in her shoes and making decisions, imagine that, like you're stepping away from it and thinking about it just like a survivor would instead of just a 1 hour training or a 2 hour training, right? So we have virtual reality as well. So we have games to better prepare our upcoming professionals, but it could also be professionals currently in the field right now that need extra continuing education or extra skills, right? So like being able to play these games that are fun, but virtual reality, right? It's funny because it looks like everybody's gaming, but they're not. They're actually, well, they're gaming, but they're sitting there and we're watching them, but they're actually learning, right, and practicing. And so for just the future simulations, I mean, we could just do all kinds of stuff from home visits to disaster preparedness. We could, I mean, there's really nothing we can't do, right? Some ways that I think about it for the community as well, I think about sexual assault response trainings, and being able to look at like healthcare settings. I think about shelter trainings, outreach trainings, cross trainings with different professionals to make sure everybody's kind of on the same page. Just anything you can think of, really, there's a way to do it, right? Okay, so now here are some questions that I just wanted you guys to look through, think about, but I wanted to have an opportunity. I think we're good for me to answer questions for you guys. Any curious anything, I'm here for you.
So Carla, Catherine, who's a participant, had the following question.
Okay.
I'm curious about how the Student Coalition does. We had one at our university, but we have struggled with dual relationships and boundary issues.
So I can tell you that the Student Coalition is relatively new, but what I can tell you is before the Student Coalition, the Relationship Violence Sexual Assault Prevention program that we had on campus or have on campus, they use students because 80% of people are more likely to report to a peer rather than to a professional. And so I actually used to oversee that department before I went into full-time teaching. And so when I was there, we had what I found was effective because I hired peer educators and peer advocates. And I had a huge team that did essentially what the Student Coalition that was recently developed was doing, right? So now we've one of them is really through the department, and then the Student Coalition is for all the disciplines, right? But what I have learned from managing the previous students, which I'm going to bring into the Student Coalition, is education and training on that very thing. So there's programs out there called like Bacchus. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it does give you basically what I call social work 101 skills that are helpful. So you could consider a program like that the students feel really proud because they get a little certificate and their license, and they go through a whole training, right? But what I've done is with my peer educators and peer advocates in the past is I would host, they were getting paid. So I would host like a 2-day training where it was like an onboarding and we talked about all these policies, procedures, and those kinds of things. For a Student Coalition, it really is student-led and it's not a paid position, it's volunteers. But what I would encourage as the advisor is I would probably work with the executive group and kind of create some sort of training opportunity so that students get some of that understanding, right? They don't have to have the major boundaries like we as professionals do, or even the peer educators or peer advocates, but they do need to understand the basics of, what it's like to help somebody else and the issues related to that. So I would probably focus on some sort of like education or even creating an experiential learning opportunity to where that is their training rather than just talking to them, like having them do a role play of how it could go and the dangers of not having good boundaries in this type of content world.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think we were prepared about how complicated it is. They're trying to help people where they live as well, which is challenging for them to set their own boundaries because they just care a whole bunch.
Yeah.
But I think, I'm twice their age and I struggle with setting boundaries sometimes. So I think we found that, then they feel overworked and kind of taken advantage of when we're telling them, no, set boundaries, you're doing too much. But it's just really hard for them to say no. And then they started just kind of doing things that we were like, actually, that's, a little almost unethical. Like we not only suggest you don't do that, you actually can't do that. So
right, because there's Title IX, right? There's even Title IX things that are going on. So yeah, I think it's a big deal. Training has to be there to support some of those issues, like be a buffer so that you don't have a lot of those issues, because our students are in that organization for a reason, right? Just kind of like social worker professionals, they're in it for a reason. They care, they're compassionate. And so we have to help them sort of hone that down and polish that so that they understand what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do, especially when Title IX. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely had a lot of training. And we also, talked about just like as a social worker, being a victim survivor yourself and then wanting to help, and how important it is to consider how you may be impacted by that. So we unfortunately had some, vigilantes, some stuff that then started kind of impacting our office, who really were supposed to be neutral because of Title IX and we work with all students. So, it was kind of impacting our office. So right now we're on a pause. We're trying to reinvent them because we want them here. It's super important. Like you said, the students feel more comfortable coming to them. But it just became a little too risky. And it was also really large. How many, and then I'll stop. How many students have y'all had in that group?
So in the peer educators, peer advocates in the past, I mean, like we've had like maybe 10 to 15
Okay.
because we were able to monitor, but again, since they are paid students, like they get a stipend or whatever,
Okay.
they would receive the onboarding training and they would meet, I think biweekly, and process, and they received a lot of supervision to be able to go out and do what they were meant to do. And we had like set policies and procedures, and like I was very, very particular about how I ran them. For the student coalition, it's relatively new.
Yeah.
So they're recruiting. Right now, I don't know how many people. The president has been able to recruit, but as the advisor, what I have done for that one is that they're not meant to provide services of any kind. It's only education. And so I think that that's how I'm going to buffer a lot of those issues, is provide training and not allow them, like, this is education. So you can do campaigns and raise awareness, do all the things. But when it comes to working individually with, if somebody comes up to you, this is what you need to do, which is refer.
Absolutely. That's definitely something that's on my mind, and also decreasing it because they got to where they were 25 and then 30 and then almost 40. And I was like, oh goodness, this is a lot. So I appreciate it. It's not a lot of people have that. So I find it hard to find people to talk to about it because we want them to be successful. So
Yeah,
I appreciate
reach
it.
out to me. I have my email and we can set up a meeting and maybe we can I can help you develop a structure for it or whatever.
Okay, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
And then Carla, as we've been going along, there's been some comments in the chat saying that's amazing and wow, especially as you were showing us your facility. And then one comment says it's good information. There are a lot of roadblocks, certainly in high schools. And if you have a comment about that.
About high schools?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just kind of some background. I love education and I love social work, and I'm one of those people who actually brought it together. So like I'm a kind of a hybrid, right? I'm actually in a PhD program for education as well. And so I've been learning a lot about the K through 12 system. And yes, I know there's a lot of roadblocks. I mean, there's roadblocks for higher ed, especially lately, in lots of ways, right? But definitely a lot more for K through 12, right? So I think sometimes we have to operate within the laws that we have, and the ability that to do the things that we do sometimes are not our own. So it could be that instead of focusing on high schoolers, it could be that you create programs to train the professionals that deal with the high schoolers, right? So it's thinking outside of the box. Like, if I can't do this with my students, is there a way that I could do this with the other people who might impact the students? So I think that's it's what I tell my son is, with your mind you can achieve, and he yells anything. So sometimes we have to be very creative. So if we can't go through a problem, we go around it, we go over it, we go adjacent to it, we go under it. And so I think it's more about like, what is it that you want to accomplish, and then try to think creatively about how to accomplish said goal, right?
And I also want folks to feel free to unmute and ask your question if you'd like to do that. Definitely have anything you want to bring up or discuss.
Feel free to ask anything. No question is dumb. I put some tips up here on the page about, how to get started with something like this if you wanted. And remember, there are times where you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If there's already organizations like us who's already doing this, maybe I haven't thought about something. Maybe there's a way for us to bring what we do to you. And I actually think it's possible. I don't see why it wouldn't be. So if there's something that you're thinking, like, I'm open to discussing. In fact, everybody makes fun of me. My team of people, we love what we do, by the way. When none of us are getting paid for this part of our work. This is all like stuff that we just want to do. We're here because we want to. We enjoy our time together, and they always make fun of me that they say I'm a very high energy person, and that I operate in like a dream world. But that's where all the stuff happens. That's where the good work happens, is in my dream world. I have all of these big ideas, and then I go backwards and I figure out, are they feasible, are they not? So I'm open to talking about all kinds of collaborations and ideas. But some things you probably should know is having champions, right? So like, you have to have people who have buy-in and who have the ability to push through the initiative that you want to do, whatever that initiative is, right? If you're on a campus, working with student affairs is crucial. A lot of times academic affairs and student affairs are like siloed. We can't do that. We have to be able to talk and build those relationships with student facing roles outside of faculty. Creating buy-in. Sometimes it's like, what is it that would benefit you? And then you think through that, and then you figure out a way to offer that so that they get that buy-in. Oh, okay, if I join this team, then this is what I get from this team, right? And vice versa. The significance is important, and setting a good foundation, right? You need to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, who's the audience, how you're going to get this done, right? Like, so that you can implement it appropriately. So any other questions, any other thoughts, comments, questions, concerns? Okay. If none, I think we're at our limit, right? But I put our information out there. I'm the first one, Carla Adenasi-Totia. So if you have any questions, or you want to set up a time to meet individually with me, or anything like that to support you, feel free to reach out. I'm here to help.
I'm going to put one last plea to fill out the conference evaluation. And Carla, we so much appreciate you being here, sharing your expertise and your time with us. I'm actually going to stop the recording now, and then